For years, the story of Jeffrey Epstein was treated like a conspiracy, something whispered about in dark corners of the internet and quickly dismissed by mainstream media. A wealthy man with powerful friends, private jets, and a private island in the Caribbean did not seem like someone who could be touched. Epstein moved through elite circles with ease, hosting politicians, scientists, royalty, and celebrities, presenting himself as a brilliant financier and generous philanthropist. Yet behind this carefully constructed image was a pattern of behavior that many young girls would later describe in chillingly similar ways. They were approached with promises of easy money, modeling opportunities, tutoring, or simple tasks that required no experience. What they encountered instead was manipulation, control, and abuse that would follow them for years. Again and again, the same destination appeared in their stories, a remote island known as Little St. James. From above, the island looked peaceful, almost unreal, surrounded by clear blue water and hidden from public view. But those who were taken there described a place where normal rules did not apply. Phones were confiscated, movements were restricted, and leaving depended entirely on Epstein's permission. The only regular way on or off the island was his private jet, later infamous as the Lolita Express. Flight logs would eventually reveal repeated trips involving underage girls and influential passengers, raising questions that would haunt investigators and journalists alike. At the highest point of the island stood a strange structure resembling a temple, something Epstein claimed was built for scientific purposes, though no convincing explanation was ever given. Locals avoided the island. Pilots whispered about it, and rumors continued to grow. Yet no serious investigation touched it for years. Epstein was not operating alone. Those close to him described a system designed to recruit, groom, and silence victims. Ghislaine Maxwell, a socialite with elite connections, was later accused of playing a central role in maintaining this system. According to testimony, she helped normalize the abuse, making young girls feel trapped and dependent, blurring the line between consent and coercion. Money, fear, and secrecy kept the operation running smoothly. Many victims signed non-disclosure agreements or accepted settlements simply to survive and move on, while others stayed silent out of fear that speaking up would cost them everything. The power imbalance was absolute, and justice seemed unreachable. When Epstein was first arrested in 2008, many believed the nightmare was finally over. Instead, what followed shocked the world. He received an unprecedented plea deal that allowed him to serve just over a year in a private section of a county jail, with work release privileges that let him leave 6 days a week. Victims were not informed. Prosecutors later admitted they were pressured. Epstein returned to his life of wealth and influence as if nothing had happened, and Little St. James remained untouched, unexplored, and officially unexplained. The message was clear to many observers. Some people were simply above the law. More than a decade later, in 2019, federal agents arrested Epstein again, this time on sex trafficking charges. The evidence was stronger, the witnesses were ready, and public attention was impossible to ignore. For the first time, it appeared that the truth might finally be exposed in open court. But before any trial could begin, Epstein was found dead in his jail cell. Authorities ruled it a suicide, yet the circumstances immediately raised suspicion. Security cameras malfunctioned, guards failed to follow protocol, and Epstein had been removed from suicide watch only days earlier. To many, it felt less like an ending and more like a final act of silence. After his death, the focus shifted to documents, flight logs, depositions, and sealed court records, now known collectively as the Epstein Files. Some names were released, others heavily redacted. Each new document answered a question while opening several more. Why were certain records sealed for decades? Why were investigations delayed repeatedly? Why has no full, transparent explanation of Little St. James Island ever been given? And most disturbingly, how many people benefited from Epstein's silence? As more documents slowly emerged, it became clear that the Epstein Files were not simply a collection of court papers, but a map of influence. Investigators and journalists who reviewed the files noticed a repeating pattern. Whenever references approached positions of real authority, the trail would suddenly weaken. Names would be replaced with initials, entire paragraphs would be blacked out, and timelines would jump forward without explanation. Former federal investigators later stated that this level of redaction was highly unusual for cases of this nature, especially when the accused was already deceased. The implication was not direct guilt, but protection, a legal buffer placed carefully around individuals whose exposure could have caused widespread political or institutional damage. Several sworn depositions described encounters with men identified only by titles or vague descriptions, such as a senior government official, a foreign leader, or a well-known public figure. Victims testified that these individuals were treated differently, with extra security, private schedules, and behavior that suggested they were untouchable. Staff members recalled being instructed never to ask questions and never to record certain visits. Flight records showed anomalies as well, including unexplained changes in passenger manifests and trips that were logged but never fully detailed. Aviation experts later confirmed that such inconsistencies were rare and often indicative of deliberate omission rather than error. Lawyers attempting to subpoena additional records faced repeated delays. Requests were challenged, hearings postponed, and in some cases, files were quietly resealed after brief public release. Journalists reported that sources inside government agencies warned them against pursuing specific leads, not by threatening them openly, but by implying career-ending consequences. One reporter described it as an invisible wall, where every path forward seemed legally blocked the moment it reached a certain level of power. The message was subtle, but unmistakable. Some areas were not meant to be explored. One of the most revealing aspects of the Epstein Files was how frequently Epstein himself appeared to anticipate danger. Emails, calendars, and internal notes suggested he was acutely aware of who mattered and who did not. Meetings with powerful figures were documented meticulously, while interactions with victims were minimized or erased entirely. Former associates claimed Epstein believed his connections functioned as insurance, a guarantee that even if he fell, others would ensure the damage remained contained. Whether this belief was accurate or not, events following his arrest seemed to support it. When Ghislaine Maxwell was put on trial, many expected the proceedings to open the door to a broader reckoning. Instead, the scope remained narrow. Witnesses were limited in what they could discuss, and references to unnamed individuals were often cut short by legal objections. Observers noted that the trial felt like a controlled burn, designed to demonstrate accountability without allowing the fire to spread. Maxwell was convicted, yet the ecosystem she operated within was left largely untouched, reinforcing the idea that accountability stopped at a carefully chosen boundary. International dimensions of the case added further complexity. Epstein maintained relationships across multiple countries, exploiting differences in legal systems and jurisdictional gaps. Diplomatic sensitivities made cooperation slow and selective. Requests for information from foreign authorities were sometimes delayed for years or denied outright. Experts later stated that cases involving transnational elites often collapse under their own political weight, not because evidence is lacking, but because consequences are considered unacceptable. Even after Epstein's death, officials insisted there was no evidence of blackmail, no organized protection network, and no coordinated effort to suppress information. Yet the structure of the files told a different story. Evidence did not vanish randomly, it disappeared selectively. Survivors noticed this pattern too. Many reported being contacted privately and encouraged to focus on personal healing rather than public accountability. Some were warned subtly that continuing to speak could invite legal or financial trouble. Silence once again proved easier to manage than truth. As years passed, public attention faded, but the documents remained quietly archived, partially sealed, waiting. Legal experts have noted that some records are scheduled to remain classified for decades, long after those involved are dead. This has fueled the belief that the full story is not being hidden to protect justice, but to protect reputations, institutions, and the illusion of integrity at the highest levels of power. The Epstein Files have become less about what they contain and more about what they refuse to reveal. Little St. James Island now stands as a symbol rather than a location, a reminder that physical evidence can be isolated, but systemic evidence is far harder to confront. The island did not operate in a vacuum. It functioned within a world where wealth grants access, access grants silence, and silence becomes policy. Epstein may have been the face of the operation, but the files suggest he was never the ceiling. And so the questions remain unresolved, echoing through redacted pages and sealed vaults. How many people were protected? How many investigations were quietly redirected? How much truth was considered too destabilizing to release? Until the remaining files are fully opened, if they ever are, the Epstein case will remain unfinished. Not because answers do not exist, but because revealing them may expose a reality that powerful systems were never designed to confront. Jeffrey Epstein may be dead, but the system that allowed him to operate for so long has never been fully exposed. This story is no longer just about one man or one island, but about power, corruption, and how easily justice can disappear when it threatens the wrong people. And as long as the full truth remains hidden, the shadows surrounding Epstein Island will never truly fade.